So my name's Graham Isaac, and I'm the producer, or the co-writer and co-producer of Wrong Side of the Road.
Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved in the film in the first instance?
Well, my background really was as a musician. I was played in bands in Melbourne in the 70s. I played in a band called Matchbox, Captain Matchbox. I think most of your viewership probably would not remember, but maybe some of their parents would. And I worked with a theatre group called the Pram Factory, and I was in Circus Oz when it started up. But that was through the 70s, so that had been my background. I'd had very little film background, but I moved to Adelaide and was teaching at a music centre called Chasm, which was a music school or music centre for Indigenous musicians, and I was there as a guitar teacher. But it was my first contact with Aboriginal Australia, and quite an exciting one for me because the music that was coming out of there just had a fabulous connection with its audience. So No Fixed Address formed in the period that I was there, working there, and also Us Mob, both of whom are in the film, Wrong Side. And also Coloured Stone, which is another band that's been around for the last 30 years on and off, Bunalori. And these were three of the first Indigenous bands writing in a contemporary style, but writing stories out of their own lives, songs coming out of their own lives, and playing them to their own audience, and it was really exciting. And you felt there was like a connection between the music and the audience that was really, it mattered a lot somehow, and was very engaging. So it was a great ride for me and a real eye-opener. And we were doing tours that went down the west coast to Seduna on the edge of the Nullarbor, and also up into the Murray River. But it was hard to get money to record with because it was before Yothu Yindi and the Warumpi Band, and there was no history of Indigenous bands playing to a white and selling records to a white market. So the record companies, the majors, would give us money for demos, but they wouldn't go any further. So so our response was, well, bugger you, we'll make a film then. So it was the 70s, or late in the 70s. So I rang Ned Lander, who was an old friend, who was a filmmaker, who just finished making a film in Arnhem Land, a film called Dirt Cheap, a quite significant film actually about the uranium mining up north. Played him the music over the phone and said, you've got to get down here, and he came down, and that's where the film started. And then we worked together with the bands. We taped a lot of interviews with them, people telling their stories, their sort of life stories, and then we decided we'd make a road movie because that was something that would foreground the music, their sort of expression of their own experience, and essentially people played themselves, or then they played out stories or events that had happened to them or that had happened to other family members or close friends. So basically everything that happens in the film comes from a real place. But it was put into this sort of dramatic framework, and we workshopped a lot with so that everyone was familiar with the process of filming, how you shoot a scene and then you stop and you move the camera to another angle and you shoot the scene again. So even though the film's got a sort of documentary look and feel to it, actually it was shot in a conventional dramatic fashion, although there's a lot of hand-holding and so forth. It was shot to look like a documentary, but actually the shooting was constructed in the way that a drama shooting is constructed. But it all came from somewhere real. Well, whilst this was happening in Adelaide, whilst these bands were writing their songs and playing in Adelaide, you had Jimmy Chai in the Kimberleys writing songs like Nothing I'd Rather Be Than to Be an Aborigine and Brand New Day and all of that, because there was this whole generation in the Kimberley who were politicised by the Nukumba dispute, a big mining dispute that happened in the mid-70s in the Kimberley. So you had musicians and artists, Indigenous musicians and artists in the Kimberley writing this stuff. You had Karma in Alice Springs, Karma being the Indigenous media production outfit producing radio and then television. That was all starting up in the 80s too. So really what was happening in Adelaide was just one part of that bigger picture.
But of course it's been put aside in part of this restoration project. over 30 years later. Can you talk a little bit about what it means for that and to be now a part of the Sydney Film Festival in 2013?
Yeah, well, it's the opportunity for the film to be restored. It's been fantastic for us. The National Film and Sound Archive have got this restoration program where films that are regarded to have been historical and or made a contribution one way or another are preserved. And the film was fading into history. It had been shot on 16mm, not Super 16, and blown up to 35 through a rather antiquated process called CRI, and it meant that the film was basically fading away. So it was a big job, the restoration job, and they had to recreate hundreds and hundreds of missing frames, going through interposers and internegs and old prints and finding frames and matching grain and grading and contrast, and then grain matching either side of the cut, and it was a huge job. So, and the National Film and Sound Archive undertook that, and we're lucky because the film would have disappeared otherwise, and it's fabulous to see it come back to life, and also to sit and watch it and feel that the film still feels, well, still has a power and still feels like it's coming from somewhere real and has a story to tell.
Well, it's fantastic to see it as part of the festival, and I've never seen it before, so I'm looking forward to it. And best of luck with it moving forward. Is it going to get a DVD re-release and things like that?
Yeah, it'll have a whole new life. Hopefully it'll run in some other festivals in Australia, and it'll also hopefully run in some regional travelling festivals. So the Sydney Festival will put it into their regional travelling festival, so it'll go to country towns throughout New South Wales. It'll have a DVD release. And there's a CD, the album's been released as well, re-released as a CD, as a digital download. And that should be up within a week. That's MGM is doing that, but if anyone wants to just Google Wrong Side of the Road soundtrack album, then they'll get that coming up. And that's become quite a historic recording too now. I mean, for the vinyl you'd probably pay $60 to buy a copy. It charted at the time. I mean, it was I think we would have sold about 10 or 15,000 copies at the time the film was released, but it's become very rare, so it's great to have the opportunity to remaster that and have that back out there as well in the public sphere.